Welcome to Talking Insights. I am your host António, and this is our new series, Polling Around the World. Today we're focusing on Latin America, a region full of cultural diversity and political dynamism. And our guest today is Urpi Torrado, a distinguished expert in market research and public opinion from Peru. So welcome, Urpi.
Hello, thank
Hi.
you for inviting me.
No worries. So I did a little research and I asked around the office, and when I was trying to put up together this episode, everyone named you and they were like, okay, if you want to do polling in Latin America, you have to talk about Urpi. She's the person to talk about. So you're the CEO of Datum International. You're the president of the Peruvian Association of Market Research, and you also work with ESOMAR as ESOMAR representative and Latin America ambassador. My first question is, how do you have the time?
I enjoy what I do, so I try to make time for myself and for what I really enjoy. I feel so lucky because I really, not everybody can say that they are working in something they like or they are pretty comfortable. So it's for me, it's not, I am not working, I am having fun.
That's great.
But I have been president of the Peruvian Association 4 times, but I am not president anymore. And yes, I am the LATAM ambassador for ESOMAR, but also I am vice president of WAPOR LATAM. So next April, I will become president of WAPOR, that is the WAPOR LATAM. It's the Worldwide Association for Public Opinion, and there is a LATAM chapter, so I will be.
That's great. And that's going to be in April. That's great. All right. So it even makes you more notable to talk about public and polling in Latin America.
My company does public opinion. We do polls, but also the company itself has 44 years in the market. So because the company has a long history polling and being connected in the region, have trying we not just we work in Peru, but we are connected with some other companies in Latam, and we are always comparing what we do for our results. It's interesting to have, I don't know, the popularity of the president, but it's more interesting if you can compare it to other countries, so you can tell what is going on in the region and how similar or how different your country is from other countries.
And I wanted to start with that, the similarities and the differences between the countries in the region and how polling and the public opinion affects the political events in the different countries. And maybe you know, like, how does that work? Is there like a big difference from country to country?
There are lots of similarities in terms of behaviors, in terms of people's views and how they feel abandoned by the governments or by the system, especially in rural areas or low-income people. Also similar in these Latam countries have a very high proportion of low-income people or low socioeconomic levels. And we have a common history and common roots in the region. So there are many similarities, but also there are differences. For example, and just as it is just an example, but for example, in Chile or Uruguay, they have a higher internet adoption. So that makes it different for polling, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You can see in those countries maybe similar problems, or Chile in 2019 had a huge political crisis that was not different from what you can see in Peru or Argentina. So, in general, we can say that we're quite similar. Religion is very important in these countries. These are very traditional countries. Although the ones that are more connected maybe are changing faster, but at the end you see that we have the same problems.
And when I was working on this episode, one of my colleagues, he mentioned that, especially in Brazil, but in some other countries, sometimes polling and the way that you work on polls, it's almost like a way to understand if the elections are rigged or not, and if the results are way too dispar, it can almost see like as a rigged election or not. Is this something that it's still happening?
not only in elections or not only in electoral times, but in general, there is a huge crisis on the whole political system in the region. We have very weak institutions. So this lack of institutions, of official information that can be trusted, of mechanisms for people to express themselves, because of the lack of a good political system, the polling has become a way to hear the voice of the people. This polling and this way of exposing what people think and feel and how they would like things to be done has become an important channel of giving voice to the people. I don't know if you understand what I mean, but what I am trying to say is that
it's almost like a different way of expressing themselves.
It's a way to let people express, but also it's a way to understand what is going on. Because sometimes what you see in the official figures or official results is, I don't know, inflation is low, but when you go to the people say prices are higher every day. So now it's more difficult for me to pay all my expenses. So there is a huge gap between what maybe officially is going on and what is going on in the family or in the day by day situation of a citizen.
Yeah, no, I agree. Speaking of which, and we're speaking about like the technology and how the things are changing, and linking back with the public trust and how it compares. Do you see like a big evolution? And you were mentioning Chile because of the internet advancements there. Do you see like the big that the polling technology has evolved a lot in the latest years?
Yes and no. It has evolved in the way when I started doing this. I am already working on market research for 30 years. So we used to do, with pen and paper interviews, and we had people from, inside the country had to send the paper in an envelope, and it took, 3 days, sometimes a week to arrive to Lima, and then we had to introduce everything to the computer, and then we had the results. So it took maybe 15 days to get the results. Now our interviewers go with a smartphone or a tablet, and they do the interviews, and we have real-time results. So that's quite a difference, and that's an improvement in terms of digitalizing our activity, and not only having results in real time. Now we know where the interviewer is walking. We can have the audio of the interview or whatever in real time. So yes, it has improved and it has changed, and it's listening to the voice of the people in real time is of course an improvement. Instead of publishing results that are 15 days old, we have results today published tomorrow. So it's and you don't have the risk that another political crisis or disruption changes the people's views. So that's an advantage. But access to rural areas and for example, do online interviews, that's another thing. There is a very low technological adoption, especially in those areas, in the most far away from the capital city. As you know, in Latam, there are countries like Peru, for example, the main city is the most developed one. Lima has 35% of the population and has 70% of the economy. So it's very developed and city, and there is a huge gap between Lima and other cities. The next over 30 million people, the next city has 1 million people. You can see the huge gap that there is. And in some other countries you have one main city, for example Colombia, Bogotá, but you have 3 or 4 other big cities like Medellin, for example, or other cities that are also more developed and have developed an important economic development. There is business going on and there is development in those cities. But still, there are other cities that don't have this development, and so there's limited internet access. There is low digital literacy, so we can ask people to complete the interview. So polling to be representative in most countries in Latam has to be done face to face. And I say most because in Chile, in Uruguay, I mentioned, and those countries' online interviews are working pretty well, but they are the exception.
And I wanted to ask, like polling by phone, like literally calling someone and asking questions, was that something that was ever big in Latin America?
You know, it was low because low internet penetration, and when it started growing, also phone calls from banks, insurance company, and all that started. People that already now that we have 100% cell phone penetration. So now most people or almost everybody has a phone. We can call them.
Yeah. And does social
People reject telephone calls and they don't answer.
they almost like think it's like a scam call, or they're calling about something else. That's interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
Scam and fraud.
And I was going to ask if like social media does have a massive impact in the decisions.
It has a mass impact in influencing people's views, not for doing market research, but yes, for influencing people with all the problems that it has related to misinformation, disinformation, fake news, that also affects our industry. I stopped counting, but we had in 2019, we had elections, and the week that we can publish results, there is 1 week that we can publish, the week before elections. And that week appear 48 fake results with the name of my company. You can imagine that there are a similar number of fake results with the name of other companies in Peru. It also affects the activity of our companies, our industry, and of course trust. There is a huge crisis in public trust. People doesn't trust anymore politicians, but also media, also market research companies. They only trust to their family and their direct family. That means your son or daughters or your children, and that's it. People don't trust anybody.
That's really interesting, especially comparing to the other parts of the world, where like if you go back on the previous episodes, like in Asia and even in North America, like it's so different, and yeah, I mean it's night and day in some cases. But it's really interesting that you're talking about the perception of the public and how to the trust that the audience and the public has from politicians and even the firms. And I was going to ask, like, how do you see that the firms especially can rebuild this trust, and what do you think that needs to change to improve this?
It's not only about what a company can do or even an industry. We can't work alone. It's not only, I can say, okay, let's, all the Peruvian Association of Market Research. Yes, they can do a lot of things, and they are doing. For example, this year we are going to have a census, and we just found that there is one question that has a bias, and we have publicly pronounced and mention what is going on. We are trying to get the possibility to talk to the authorities, but they don't open the door. So yes, that builds trust, because we are saying this is going on and this is wrong, and we have to check on this. So that helps, but only that is not enough to build trust. There is an important role of the media, of the whole political system. There is a big crisis. For example, in Peru, we're having elections next year, and there are around 40 political parties. If we try to estimate how many candidates we are going to have next year, because we will be electing president, Congress, and local authorities. So, considering the amount of parties, we will have about 500,000, 500,000 candidates next year. That's crazy. So,
Whoa.
People see this as a business, and citizens think that this is that all these people running for different positions or leadership things just do it because of money or because they have personal interest on something, but they are not thinking on people needs. So this affects the whole system. Yes, a company or a whole industry can work, but if they work alone, nothing will happen. That means that we have to work with other industries, the private sector, with companies. Industries have to be involved. In Peru, for example, the market research companies, the association is not working alone. It's working with other associations, other groups that are also working on this direction. So it's not the problem of one company, it's the problem of the whole system. And has to be addressed like that.
That's good. That's good that there's that cooperation between companies and all the institutions, and I mean that's the way that it should be done, to give a voice to everyone.
And still, times have changed a lot, but still you can sometimes we have interviewers that when we get to the house, they open the door and let you in, and for some people it's still an experience to answer an interview. So that's why it still works face-to-face interviews. It's important to say that sometimes working or doing polling in Latam is a challenge, because sometimes the government feels threatened by our polls, because sometimes we are saying they're not popular or the government is not popular. And we have had in the past, for example, the case of Ecuador, that the government went into Sedato's offices, a local company, and they took the computers, took everything to check if what they are doing if there was something wrong or if they were inventing the polls. They couldn't prove anything, but it was a long trial. It affected the company, the reputation of the industry. So that is going on sometimes in Latam countries, that the government, instead of listening people's views and concerns, instead of listening the message, they try to kill the messenger, and that's affecting the companies and also our activity.
And is it violent to that point? Not killing someone, but to the point of stopping someone, for example, to enter a village, or stopping someone to work on certain locations?
Yes, especially in rural areas. They are well organized. So if you don't get validation from the head of the community, and the head of the community is not an elected official leader, it's something that is very local and it's related to that group of people. If you don't get the authorization, you can work there. We have had in the past interviewers kidnapped by the citizens, waiting for the validation of their leader, or trying to check if that person really worked with us. We have also some people, some sort of violence, because in less organized communities, people just hit the interviewer. So we don't want you here, and they broke their nose, for example, or something like that. So yes, there is, in some cities or in some places, there is some sort of violence, and we try to avoid, but there is always risk of arriving to a place that you thought or you didn't have any information about how violent or not they are.
Yeah, that's really interesting, especially comparing with what you were saying, that sometimes people are even invited, and interviewers are even invited to people's homes, and so there's like a more personal experiences versus, again, by the phone or internet. And to have that personal connection, I can tell like how it can go both ways. It can go really well, and you can get like almost a personal friend connection, or you can get punched.
Yes, it depends on where you go, and you have to. It's quite difficult. I have a few weeks ago, I was sitting with interviewers, talking with them and about their experience, and some of them really like what they do and their activity, and they enjoy it. But they can tell, sometimes I finish so happy at the end of the day because I had a really good experience, and sometimes I end crying because I worked for 4 hours and couldn't get one interview, because you arrive to areas where people are connected in a WhatsApp group or whatever sort of chat group. There is someone suspicious and don't open the door or don't answer their questions. So if that happens, you can walk for hours and nobody will open. So it can be a great experience. It can be also frustrating and difficult.
I can tell. I can imagine. And it's almost like I don't know the solution to that, but I can imagine that to form those friendly connections and those familiar faces and have those connections, I feel like that's a way to go, and to have different familiar connections all around the region could be a way to go. But again, there's no really a great solution, I think.
No, geography is also a challenge in the region. As you know, we have highlands, we have jungle. Access to some areas are also challenging.
Yeah.
There are communities that you have to get. It takes 7 days to get there because you have to go take a plane, then a boat, then a bus, and then another boat, because they are far away. So if you really want to have a representative sample, you have to get to those places. And that's the problem with today's polling, and sometimes you think that it's important to have it right now, and it's more important to be agile and be fast and have results immediately than to spend 7 days traveling. So sometimes companies sacrifice that, and that's why at the end, when you have polling and you have to compare the results of a poll to the official ones in an election, there is sometimes that's how we explain the difference between the official results and the polling, because in that poll was not represented the whole country because of these geographical challenges that we have. And
yeah.
So that's important to keep doing face-to-face interviews, but companies and clients have to be aware of this, because sometimes they are they want fast, and they don't want to pay. They want cheaper solutions, and to get representative samples and to get a really national view of what is going on in a country is not easy. It's not cheap. We can do it faster than in the past, but sometimes we need some time to get to these places.
Yeah, it's the whole conundrum there, right? Like, you can get cheap and fast, or you can get cheap but then the results are not good, or then you can have like fast and good, but then it's really expensive. So you cannot. There's always like the trifecta. You can always like pick two, and that's it.
But you have to be aware of what are you sacrificing and what are the risks and what are you missing in your study.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and it's fascinating to see how things are done in that region, because I feel like it's really different from different parts of the world.
In some countries, the governments that wanted to control what people is saying about the government, there were initiatives in Peru, Colombia, Mexico, Uruguay. So in many countries we had these initiatives that the polling companies have to give the complete database with the names of people that have been interviewed. And market research companies or polling companies had this important role on protecting the identity of the people that answered interviews. So now there are data protection laws, and the situation is under control. But I think that the role that we had, how we brought our guidelines and code of ethics and showcase the experience that, because we are part of big networks like ESOMAR or WAPOR, we show how it was done in other countries, and the importance of protecting the identity of the people that is answering the polls. It was very important to avoid having these laws passing or being published.
And how old-ish are those laws? And do you see them, or do you see them evolving, or what's lacking on those laws, or if there's something lacking?
It's not general the word, but now those laws are more universal, more similar to the ones in Europe, to the GDPR, for example, because our countries in some way copy or adapt what is going on in other regions. But from time to time, there is always a politician or a congressman or someone that appears with a law. Now we need to regulate this. We need these companies to give the whole information. The last one was Colombia a couple of years ago, but it appears from time to time. So last time was Colombia, next time, we don't know, maybe Paraguay or Mexico or whatever. It depends on the government. That there is always an initiative going on, and we are, in that way, we're quite united, saying, remember, these are our principles, this is what we think, and this is how it works in other countries. And that's why we're connected in the region and working together on avoiding these laws that are, especially when the government is not good or when a political party is losing, they appear with these initiatives trying to change or stop us publishing results.
Because even when you're doing interviews face to face, they're not entirely anonymous, right? You have to get some type of names or locations or something like that, right?
We have, because we have we do it with the smartphones. We have where the interview was done, the name for supervision. We get the name, the phone. Then we anonymize the database and we don't connect the information. But at the beginning, the information is connected, so you can tell who approves the government and who disapproves. So if we give that database with the names and the responses, there is a huge risk for those people in a government that wants to control the public opinion.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. And even like the friendly connections that we were talking and we were mentioning, like to have those friendly connections, I feel like those have to be nourished and cherished in a way that they you almost have to don't say who they are, but in order to have that connection, right? So you can go to those villages, so you can go to those areas and be receptive and be welcomed. So yeah, I think that's a big challenge. I mean, I have a list of challenges that you have. This is the episode with the most challenge, and I think it's fascinating. Again, like I always have these episodes and we always learn so much, and it's really interesting in these regions because it's not Europe and the US, and you learn something new. You always know how things are generally done, but I had no idea that like you had to go face to face to villages and ask questions and you could get punched. I mean, you can imagine, but I mean, it's not something that you imagine every day that happens, or it's a complete different reality, and it's so interesting. And I think that's something that even the listeners sometimes are not really aware of it. Even in parts of the world, like we have a massive listenership from Asia, from India, and it's similar. There's some similarities, but it's not as, I don't want to say it's harder or easy. There's some challenges as well, but it's different. It's completely different.
I can tell, even in our industry, when we talk or when I talk to other colleagues that, they're in the industry, we're all connected, we work together, but we didn't part of different committees or groups working, for example, updating the code of ethics for polling. It's a way for ESOMAR initiative to update the guidelines that we already had. Sometimes the discussion is always related to how we do online research or telephone interviews, and I raise my hand and face to face, and nobody does it. No, in Latam we do it. So I am all. And yesterday I was in a meeting and they thought I was joking because they said this not face to face, but it was a type of project design. They said no, this is not longer going on anywhere. And I said, no, yes, we're doing it in Latam. And they said, oh, good joke. No, it's not a joke. We still have this project design going on in Latam because it's a different reality. It's the quality of research in Latam is quite good. I attend the ESOMAR Congress, the Global Congress that is in Amsterdam last year in Athens, and also attend the Latam conference, and I can tell that the quality of the papers, of the speakers, of the research that they are showcasing in these events are very high. It's very similar. I can say that there is a big gap in the quality of what we do. No, the standard of what we do in Latam is very high, that it can compete at an international level. But we're still doing some type of projects or methodologies that are not longer possible in other countries, but they didn't disappear.
Yeah, and you can learn everything at the Latam conference.
Of course, you have to come to understand it.
And I was going to ask especially about that, the voices and the concerns and when doing these types of pollings, and especially in politics, like if some type of topics like the climate concerns or I don't know, the indigenous people. Are those things that you see flagged in the pollings or even in politics in general?
In one way or the other, polls are including those topics, and yes, we have an important role on visibility and showing what is going on in these topics, because there is of course a big gap between the reality. I already told you that sometimes official figures hide what is going on in the day-by-day reality of people or in homes. So yes, it's a way of giving a new perspective to all these topics and understand people's views. Sometimes the discussion is, no, people are not concerned about environment, and when you see our results, you can tell that people are concerned, and especially in countries like ours that has a big portion of the economy is related to mining, for example. So the activity of mining companies, that can be a big discussion, but there are good mining companies that are working, taking care of the environment, and there are the ones that they aren't.
Mm-hmm.
And that affects in countries that also have a big agricultural activity, and is important, especially in rural areas. So finding the balance and showing the bridge that we can find between what is going on in some areas, it's key, because if you report this and report what people is thinking and feeling and what's their perception, you can act as an authority. The problem is that when you don't have information, you think that everything is going on well, and it is not. So polling is really a tool for the government, yes, but also for private companies or sectors that are acting in the country and need to understand the impact that they are having.
Yeah, that's interesting to showcase the results so there can be some action, and showcasing first that people are interested and are worried about these issues, then the politicians can make something happen. That's really interesting. And one thing that I didn't mention at the beginning, and I was kind of like letting for the end, is that you're also helping ESOMAR with the LATAM event. And in that event, I can imagine that there's going to be a lot of polling companies, a lot of people that are working in the area. Do you have any, I don't want to say like a speaker or a talk in specific, but something that you that you would recommend from that event?
The LATAM conference is going to be in Lima. You know, the LATAM conference already had 25 editions. It's not years, because we had years without a conference, like the COVID years, and at the beginning it was a conference every 2 years in LATAM. Now it's every year. So after 25 editions, it is going to be for the first time in Peru. So I am quite excited. I am part of the program committee, and I can tell that everything is quite exciting. There is the opening speaker is going to talk us about how Peru developed all this culture related to food, and how we develop the tourism for the culinary or for a food experience. So in the past, people were coming only to Peru to see Machu Picchu, and that's it. Now there is people that are coming for restaurant tours, and Peruvian food is well known everywhere, and there are now many restaurants all over the world. So the opening speaker will tell us how Peru developed this. She has been the head of the institution that was in charge of developing this. So it will be quite interesting to understand that. But also we have a panel of LATAM associations that will talk about the impact of the law related to the octagons for packaging, and how that affects or not people's behavior related to consumption and buying certain products. So we will see the impact of law in people's behavior. So that will be interesting, and this panel will be comparing what is going on in 5 different countries in Latin. That's quite interesting. And then there are many papers related of what is going on in financial inclusion, in digital inclusion. So it is going to be quite interesting.
It's definitely a great event to understand how the region is actually working and what's going on. It's a non-miss event for sure. And you'll link everything in the description of this episode. There's like all the links for everything, so you can find like, the tickets and all the information. Well, Thank you so much, Urpi. It was great. I learned a lot. I always do in this episode, but I think it's always interesting as the series progress to look back and see like the little differences, like the way that in some countries or in some regions internet works and in some others, like in America, like in the first episode we were talking about so much about the how talking on the phone was such a big hit, and versus in India and Latin America it's just not that much, and it's really interesting to compare. So thank you very much for your time.